Welcome to The Great Reboot. I'm Tori Ryden. This week, an article was published in Newsweek revealing the mental underbelly of the COVID pandemic. The title, Researchers Warn of Deaths of Despair as Hardship and Grief and COVID-19 Lockdowns Create Mental Health Crisis. Physically, coronavirus deaths have shattered any other modern-day recorded illnesses. And according to a study conducted by Wellbeing Trust and the Robert Graham Center, and highlighted in the article, COVID could lead to tens of thousands of deaths of despair from suicide, alcohol, and drug use. Together, all of us, the world, is experiencing a form of trauma. Dealing with an event outside the usual realm of human experience can be distressing and can create a sense of helplessness, anxiety, or panic. And for children, it can be devastating. Harvard's Dr. Richard Weisbord describes it this way. Children are more distressed when parents appear helpless and passive, and more comfortable when parents are taking action. And our guest here on The Great Reboot understands all of this very well. Juleanne Stewart is a counselor, MCPC, MA, who practices equine psychotherapy. That's the use of horses to help treat health issues from PTSD to trauma to anxiety. And I want to welcome you to The Great Reboot, Julie.
Thank you.
It's such a dark time. I mean, that's kind of the understatement of the day for so many people, Julie. And I'm wondering, what are you seeing trending right now among children?
I think one of the biggest things that I'm starting to notice is, first of all, they really miss their friends. And they, more than ever, I've ever heard them say they want to go back to school. So I had one girl tell me that it felt like life wasn't real anymore. So much time on the computers, so much time in, excuse me, so much time in cyberspace, so to speak, that it really doesn't feel real for some of these kids. So, you know, it's becoming an issue that, as far as I can see, they really need to get outside. They really need to do 6-foot walks, 6 feet apart, 8 feet apart walks. But they need to be in the outside world with other people, socially distant, of course. But yeah, I think it's hard. They're talking about headaches. They're talking about, their eyes hurting because they're on the computer for so long.
Yeah, I'm wondering, are you hearing anything? Some of the messaging I've been hearing is that it's so hard for these kids. They feel they have that overwhelming sense of lack of control over anything. And they feel, they're probably hearing fear from their parents, kind of mixed messaging, of course, about masks and distance and all of that. And, it's got to be very hard for a child to process all of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it really does depend on the families and how supportive they are with their kids. There's some families that are absolutely wonderful in terms of, setting up a really regular routine where the kids get up in the morning and they kind of know that they spend a certain amount of time on homework and schoolwork, and then they can go outside and they have activities. They do a lot of cooking and baking. And then there's other kids, who are not getting those kinds of things. And I think those are the ones that we should be the most concerned about, that don't have a schedule sort of built into their day anymore, except for school. And so it's across the board in terms of how it's affecting kids. But I think what you said earlier, is very true. If kids feel like their parents are in control and kind of have it together, then in fact the kids feel that way too. They feel safe and secure.
You hear the terminology of equine, therapy and psychotherapy. And so I have a flash of, like, right behind you, you've got this beautiful painting or photograph of a horse, and they're large creatures. And I
Mhm.
wonder, how does that work? Therapy on the back of such an enormous animal, that many people, I mean, honestly, are afraid of horses. And I'm wondering, how does that work?
So basically, horses are very emotional beings, which a lot of people don't realize. And because of that, they're so incredibly therapeutic as well. And there's a lot of kids, there's a lot of people that really gain a lot of um, comfort from being around animals, whether it be dogs or cats or, in this case, horses. So I do a lot of groundwork with the horses and the kids, where they first learn safety and they learn to work with them on the ground, and they learn, trust. There's many, many, many things that you can learn through a horse, and it's non-declarative. In other words, it's not anything that kids are like recognizing as learning, and yet they are. So there's many different facets where that can happen, in terms of body awareness and anxiety, and setting good boundaries, and being clear about how somebody expresses themselves, and it goes on and on and on. And it's a wonderful way to sort of take the stigma of counseling out of it, and really look, using the horse as sort of a conduit to helping that person to achieve their goals, really in a way that just feels much more natural, and comforting. And the horse is, scary and yet awe-inspiring at the same time. So.
Okay, I would love, because I'm just so curious about this, if you could kind of take us through, the moment that, you've identified a child, and I'm wondering, what is the age that you might start, but you've identified a child who might really benefit from this. And I'm thinking that the horse must pick up on some of our emotions, and just take us
Absolutely.
through, if you would, because I think that that's so fascinating, kind of from where you identify and then what you're seeing as helping them.
Okay, so for instance, there might be a child that has had a lot of trauma, and so they're experiencing a number of different things that they need to work on, and so that child gets identified with depression, anxiety, PTSD, and so basically they learn, first and foremost, horse safety, how to be around the horse, what some of the body languages of the horse. Horses can, I think it's 17 different facial expressions. So that's pretty cool to know. And so basically they learn that the first couple of times. And they learn how to brush them, and what some of their body language means. And then from that point, they start to learn how to lead them and how to work with them. And basically, one of the most wonderful things with this is that, and this is true with veterans as well, a wonderful thing for veterans is the horse is really unconditionally accepting, as long as that person is, number one, real, which is really cool because they can see right through a person. It's not about the language, it's about the body language and what that's saying. And so there's this interchange between the two where the person is learning how to interact with the horse, and the horse is mirroring back what they're saying to the horse. And one of the wonderful things that comes out of it is self-esteem and an increase in the person's, the kids' feelings about their abilities. If they can work with a horse, if they can work with this incredibly huge horse that's scary and big, what else can they do in the world? You know, what else can they accomplish? And so you see their self-esteem going up. And that in itself is just a wonderful thing to see them start to handle the horse by themselves and, you know, communicate clearly to, you know, have the horse respect their boundaries, to exercise trust and with the horse, to the list goes on and on and on. It's incredible, you know, to recognize how to, you know, we do breathing when they ride in order to be relaxed so the horse can be relaxed, because the horse mirrors what they feel. And so they learn how to be aware of their body and how to breathe if they're anxious, and how that, you know, brings the horse's level of anxiety down, because the horse obviously picks up on that. And so it's this beautiful interchange while they're picking up these non-declarative things, and it goes on from there, where they're able, you know, I've had kids that were able to take the horse, and I'll be with them, and they go from, you know, taking the horse out, putting them in the cross ties, brushing them, bringing them out, and, you know, working them on the ground, doing what we call lunging, or, you know, and where they have the horse walk, trot, and canter. And all of this is from not knowing anything. And what are they gaining? They're gaining self-confidence. They're gaining ability to, you know, also to have, you know what it feels like to care for something else beside themselves. So empathy, another one. It's incredible the amount of things that, especially kids, but, you know, adults as well, can learn. So
it sounds just so empowering and
yeah.
really amazing for kids and adults, as you just said. I wanted to go back just to clarify something that you mentioned. Is it the 17 facial expressions that the horse recognizes in humans, or that the horse has 17
The horse
different?
has. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
knew? I mean, I never knew that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, fact check me, but I'm pretty sure it's 17. It's a lot more, you know, they communicate by a swish of the tail, they communicate with their lip hanging, they communicate with their ears, many different ways. And so for a person to be able to read that horse, they end up talking with that horse, you know, through the interchange of what the horse does and what they do in response. And yeah.
It's such a, and it seems like it's going to be on the horse's time also,
Mm-hmm.
which is a different timetable. I would imagine it just, and
Yeah.
it forces you into kind of a different place in your brain, maybe too.
It does. It absolutely does. And it is on their time, and they're very, you know, non-judgmental. They just are real, and it's real time, and it's real stuff. There's no pretenses with a horse. They don't know what that is. So it's, in the purest sense, just, you know, just a wonderful way to communicate in a real way.
I'm wondering if you can share with us, you know, maybe a story of one person or a couple people in which you've seen transformations, you know, through this equine, you know, therapy, and you know, if you can kind of take us, it helps to personalize it a little bit.
Well, without naming names, obviously, I have a wonderful girl who around started seeing me around 10, 11, I want to say. You know, had been in pretty rough family situation, and you know, a lot of trauma for a young person. And they didn't know anything about horses, but loved them and wanted to learn. And that's one of the other things, is you get such enthusiasm. And in a normal situation where a kid might sit there and say, I'm not going to talk, I don't care. They get near a horse and they just start talking. And they talk about anything. And it's amazing because it's two different people, really. But yeah, in this case, this person just kept coming every week, working, you know, with the same horse. And you know, we needed to work on boundaries. We needed to work on self-esteem. We needed to work on clear communication. And one of the things I remember is they learned how to lunge the horse, which is they're on a long line and they go in a big circle, and you give them commands: walk, trot, canter. And in the beginning, I would say, okay, you know, get them to trot, and they would say, trot, and I'd say, no, mean what you say, you know, like, just like in life, mean what you say and say what you mean, and be clear. And so they started saying, trot, trot, and I said, okay, you know, all right, that's different, that's a different sound, and he believes you now, and the horse trots. So it's this, you know, this thing where the horse is saying, you don't mean that. Why should I listen to you? And then when she did mean it, the horse started to trot. So in this particular person, I just saw this enthusiasm and an increase in self-esteem. The self-esteem I just absolutely love, because if somebody can gain self-esteem, everything else starts to formulate and fall into place as well. But you know, we worked on boundaries. So the horse would, you know, come closer to her, and she would say, back up, you know, get out of my space. This is my bubble, just like we learned, you know, in school. And you know, somebody that grows up with poor boundaries in their family, they're working with a horse, and we start talking about what are good boundaries, you know, what does that look like? It looks like somebody not sort of coming into your space and saying, I can do whatever I want with you. You say, no, you can come so far, and then you need to stop, and that's the way it's going to be. So with a horse, practicing good boundaries again was another thing. And at first it was like, you know, no, no. And then it was like, no. So to see this kid go from, you know, meek and mild mannered to really asserting themselves it's just so, for me, it's just so heartwarming. I absolutely love it. And so this person ended up, it's been a couple of years, ended up being able to take this horse from A to Z, you know, and ride, and incredible difference in her self-esteem and her control, and her awareness, you know, of her own body, and her awareness of how she communicated what she was saying, and that it needed to be clear, and that being a leader it doesn't mean being, you know, mean. It just means being clear and being concise and saying what you need. And kids need to learn that in life, that they need to voice what their needs are, in a kind and clear way, and the world will give it back. So anyway, her grades went up in school. There were conferences with teachers that were blown away by the performance that she had initially had and then was having now. And, they talked about the equine stuff, but her grades just went way up.
So everything shifted for her, which
Everything
is fantastic.
shifted.
So, but I'm wondering now, I know that you're really, and I'm going to use this phrase, chomping at the bit, to get back to what you do, but because in comes COVID and it changed everything for you. And I'm wondering, how did you kind of manage to shift and yet keep your very patients and clients, in a healthy place? What did you have to do?
Well, I mean, I see a lot of people also not doing equine. So, we've had to do telehealth for a lot of these kids. As the weather's getting better, we're doing sessions in and around the farm, 10 feet apart, with chairs, sitting by the horses, as they graze, and come by for a head rub or whatever. And that's just really, really therapeutic in this day and age. We did that yesterday, as a matter of fact. So, not a lot of work with the horses per se, and if there is, careful about, the brushes not being touched, and that they, wash their hands, and we stay 6 feet apart, and they can, it's a little tricky, but, I really feel like kids need to be outside. And so if we can meet, one of the other things I do is take a little walk with them in the woods, or take a hike, or something outdoors is just, really so therapeutic for everybody, of course.
For all of us, I was going to say that. I mean, that's just to turn everything off and be outside, and it just is so important. I couldn't agree more with that. What are your big concerns for kids, as we, who knows how long it's going to be? So when we start to come out of it, I guess I want to be sensitive to that, because we don't know how long that's going to take. But, there is so much fear. There's so much anxiety, the trauma. Are you expecting to see a swell in the number of people reaching out to you for, to line up equine therapy? And I'm wondering, as you look ahead, what are your concerns for kids, and what should people be looking out for?
I mean, I think for kids, it's just, when this all started, kids were sort of in lockdown mode with their families and in their house. And it's, it's been a long time now, and they're really missing their friends. And so I've talked to parents about doing, this 6 to 8 feet apart dates to get together, to just see their friends in person, supervised or whatever. But I do think that it's super, super important for them to get outside and be in the real world, so it doesn't feel like they're in cyberspace in some kind of, bad dream. My biggest concern would be that they were able to get together with their friends in a way that's safe, whether that be take, a walk, 8 feet apart or 6 feet apart, or sit in their backyard, but that they have that chance. Adults, are doing it in different ways, and kids are absolutely, I think, some parents are super concerned and obviously want to keep their kids safe, but at some point those kids really need to have some kind of interaction with their friends. That's part of their socialization, part of their mental health, really. It's going to be different, obviously. They can't go run and wrestle, but just to have them in body versus doing a Zoom call, which I think has been really, sort of the thing to do up until this point.
Julie, what would you, I guess I'd love for you to give 3 or 4 things that parents should be looking out for with their kids. Sometimes people grow inured to certain signs that they think is just commonplace for their child to be acting that way. But what would you give parents, what kind of, not warnings, but what should they be looking out for in their kids to alert them that there might be some issues that they really need to get some help?
Yeah. I think if they're withdrawn, I think that's, they're spending more and more time sort of alone in their room. There's different age groups, so there's different situations with different age groups. The younger ones, obviously, I think the younger ones are sort of taking it a little bit easier than, say, the tweens and the teens, because, for them, that's big time to socialize and sort of learn who they are. So for those kids, yeah, socially or isolating in the family, staying in their room, not doing a lot of talking, a sullen attitude. It's there's some pretty telltale signs. It's hard. It's really hard for them right now because they want to be out and they want to be interacting with their friends and they can't. And so I'm trying to think of, another sign. We worry about like cutting and things, like self-harm, because these kids are, as we go forward and this gets longer and longer, are getting more and more stressed and more frustrated with this whole thing. And so, yeah, it's unprecedented territory. We don't know what, the long-term effects are going to be, but certainly, it's going to be something for sure, trauma. And so, I do think parents need to check in with their kids and see how they're doing, to talk with them, take the time to talk with them, and to, take the time to set up times where they can get together with their friends. If they're feeling uncomfortable, then watch, but just, sort of try. Some kids have siblings and that's much easier, but kids that are only children, and they're stuck inside, they need those times with their friends to interact. So I would say, just keep in touch with them and talk with them, and take some time to take a walk with your kids and have conversations. There's nothing like captive audience. You're on a walk, it can't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would love it if you could share your information if people want to reach out to you. Do you have a website people could go to check you out?
Psychology Today. I have a whole bio on there, and currently that's pretty much where I am. But that's a great site to go to if you're curious.
And I love what you're doing with equine therapy, and it just sounds like it is just such a great answer for so many people. It's a beginning for so many people, and I just can't thank you enough for joining us here on The Great Reboot.
Thank you. It's been great. Really nice to talk with you guys.